Good evening and a very warm welcome from Military Literature and Cultural Festival Foundation to the 15th session of the Military Literature Festival Lucknow. Today we have completed 15 sessions and we have gone through about 50 panelists, and we will be back next year. We have only one live session left, which is Kissa Goi, which will happen in the Surya Auditorium here at Lucknow on 21st, 22nd, 25th, and 28th of November, which is about 1971. I must thank my team of Colonel Sharad Awasthi, who is our mentor, Brigadier B.N. Singh, Colonel Fasi Ahmed, Dr. Colonel Madhu Badhuria, Captain Sujit Rawal, Colonel Jitendra Chauhan, Pradeep Kapoor, Shalini Singh, Harish Asthana, and our technical support, Pankaj Kumar. We are also grateful to Sitapur Eye Hospital, who in the beginning made us stand on our feet. So thank you all so much. Before we get on to the today's session, we have started this new thing where we showcase the talent from our veterans who have been doing well in the artistic and cultural fields. So today we have Brigadier Mandeep Sandhu, who is from Para SF, a veteran who is settled in Canada. He has a mission called World Peace Through Harmonica Music. So I will say what he has told me in his own words. After being in uniform for 41 years, very satisfying years, along with my wife Jyotsna, we decided to give our something back to the society, and we decided on peace, the very inherent nature of mankind. While identifying peace, we realized that a few moments of thought, free stillness of mind by focusing on only one issue elevates mood by infusing state of inner peace. If one individual is in this state, the world becomes a better place. As a means for this, we selected music as it has no boundaries or languages. Harmonica displayed the needed versatility of easy carriage, spontaneous play being literary, and orchestra in your pocket. The journey thus began in January 2017 by starting online classes with my instructor, Shri Apurva Bhatt in Vadodara, and it still continues. Our music channel, Mandeep Harmonica Music, with the punchline, World Peace Through Harmonica Music, was formed in early 2018 and now has its own URL. Each song carries peace message, and we have now graduated in recording a video at sites of massive battles or memorials. Our project is totally self-financed, and all videos from start to end are home production, with Jyotsna being the director of photography. Hoping you all too, in your own ways, join in this effort, devising your own ways of projecting peace. Happy viewing and best wishes from Mandeep Sandhu from Canada and Special Forces. Pankaj, can we have the video, please?
Lovely. Wow.
So good.
Thank you so much. Brigadier Sandhu looks as young as he was when he was commanding brigade alongside. And I would say a great initiative piece is what we want. Coming to today's session, we have two veterans, or should I say, characters. They are fascinating characters in their own rights, and they have been great military men. But what they have in common is their drive and their thinking powers, and both write novels and they dabble on writing about geopolitics and things like that. So, without introducing them, without introducing Gadkari and Gill, I will hand you over to these two fascinating characters to carry on for next about an hour, talking to each other, discovering, as well as talking about their books. That is Flight to Pakistan by Dr. Azam Gill from France and Oscar Tango by Major General Nitin Gadkari, who is from Pune. So over to you, Nitin.
Good evening, HK. Good evening, Lucknow Military Literature Festival. Firstly, it's an absolute privilege and pleasure to be with you, and honor to have been called in one of your sessions, and luckily is the final session of this year. Uh, Today's program is a little different than what probably you would have seen. There is no moderator per se. The two of us are going to moderate each other. Do let me introduce to you my co-panelist. Now, if I was to choose a co-panelist across the world, I don't think I could have come up with somebody like Dr. Azam Gill. HK mentioned that he's a character because he has so much of character in him. And as I narrate to you, you will understand what I'm saying. Now, Dr. Azam Gill was born a Pakistani by birth, but a French national by deed. He was born in Lahore in 1952, if I'm not wrong, did his early studies in Lahore. He has done his master's in English literature in Lahore Government College, one of the colleges. Thereafter, he did his master's in American literature from one of the French colleges. He also has got a diploma from one of the French colleges and finally went on to do his doctorate. But that is not the life story of Dr. Gill. Dr. Gill also was commissioned into the Pakistan military after having gone through the Pak Military Academy, Kakul. And in fact, I must narrate this, that when first I saw his biodata, when it was given to me, and I saw Pakistan Military Academy, Kakul, shook me a little bit because I was wondering whether I'm interacting with a person who is still serving, because I did not know anything about him till then. But as events unfolded, I realized his life is one which can actually be turned into a novel itself. So we would take that from him. But after that, for some reason, he left the army in 1975, 71 to 75. And as he says, he served on the LOC. And as we go into the questionnaire, there are certain questions that I have reserved for him that should bring out some of his experience at the LOC. He joined the French Legionnaire, and like somebody said, to join the French Legionnaire is a legend by itself. Not everyone is blessed, not everyone can do it. It is tough. And we would like to hear that also from him in the later part as I go along. Finally, when he left, he became a French citizen, took the exam for his first class so-called government level entrance exam, which made him a class 1 gazetted officer in France. And that is what he is. He is now retired and settled, but before that he was a professor in the University of Toulouse teaching English literature. He is an active writer. He has written 6 novels, out of which 3 are fiction, 3 are non-fiction. He is a huge blogger. His blogs are worth reading about. He writes about all subjects across the board and writes them very, very candidly. And if you have a chance, do look at them. He has 3 children, if I understand from his biodata, and a wife who are in France. He dabbles in a little bit of French boxing, as I see. He's fond of running. He's fond of cooking, and he loves to live his life fully. That's for you, Gil Saab. I hope I've done justice. If I haven't, please pick up the threads as you get along. And I hope now you're ready for the Indian Inquisition. Are you ready, Gil Saab?
Yes, yes, sir.
Thank you. And we will lay down a rule. I will ask you questions what I want. You have the right to answer them the way you want.
Thank you.
Okay. Good. Now, in the notes that we circulated to each other, during this time when we got to know each other, when I saw your note that came to me, and I found a distinct, stark difference between what you sent me and what I sent you. So what I sent you was probably a very plain Jane minor SD, minor SD filled, a simple note. And what I got from you was a joyful, mixed up, unconventional, and full of fun. So that got me thinking. I said, how is it that where do you get this gregarious part of your character? Does it come from your Punjabi background, or is it a part of it you owe it to the Pakistani army? Yeah, Gil Saab.
South Asia has millions of hybrids. We are all cultural hybrids. Even if we had not been stuck in the framework of Angrezi brought by the Gora, there is so much cultural diversity in all the regions of South Asia. Just keeping the army aside, keeping the English bit aside, my father was a Punjabi. My mother was from Jammu. They had no real common, their real common language was English, although very quickly because of my in-laws, my great-grandfather and my grandfather was an adult when they were converted from Sikhism to Christianity. And because Christianity doesn't really have a cultural framework, they kept, my grandfather till his last days kept his case. He wore the kada. And my puppies after partition, before partition, they wore kadas and carried kirpans, and they were very devout Christians. And after partition, because they lived in a small place and they were lady health visitors, they wore burqas so our family would have respect. Now, into this Marmite, when you put in a dash of English, then Pakistan was created. Now, there were 4-5 natural ethnic languages in Pakistan, and the language spoken by the largest number of Pakistanis at its creation happened to be Bangla. There was a choice to have Urdu, which is about 2,000 miles distant, because you've got the border with India. Then Punjabi continues up until the border with Uttar Pradesh. And then it is suddenly picked up and adopted by the people residing in Pakistan. And the choice is not based on linguistics, ethnology, or history. So there was this choice. When I was born, when I went to school, I was little. English was the official language. Urdu was the national language. So Pakistan, even now, linguistically is a bigamist. And the bigamy is legalized. It's linguistic bigamy. Now, in that bigamy, there was a choti biwi, badi biwi. And families tend to choose. So, what were we brought up on? Apart from the Holy Bible in our house, we obviously had a copy of the Holy Quran, and that was also my father's working tool. He was a magistrate, and he needed to often consult it, and he was very much in demand by Muslims in succession disputes because they said he's a Christian, he has no denominational pressure on him, and so we also had a copy of the Holy Bhagavad Gita. And in summer, like all of us, we slept on the roof with a pedestal fan and mosquito nets. Our mother used to tell us Mahabharata and Vedic stories and take us to the library, which had an air conditioner. We didn't have an air conditioner at that time. Take us to the American Library. And we read the whole series of Winnie the Pooh and Enid Blyton and the Famous Five, etc. So I think I've gone on and on and on. I think I've answered your question. So that makes a sort of hybrid. And then, of course, Punjabi humor. Punjabi humor has a lot of wit. It is self-deprecating. It is very metaphorical. You are fortunate for being a Mard Maratha, and they've been beating Indian Punjabis at Kabaddi consistently for years. So there is this bridge of humor and good spirit between us, but Punjabi humor is very, very particular. And it can get people living close to you very tired if they're not Punjabis.
Okay, Gill sir, thanks a lot for that. And I'll play to the gallery, if you don't mind. And
Please.
I'll ask you a question which you can even take us through your French legionary experience. Now, I had asked you before this also that when I read your writing, I find that you have tremendous amount of love and respect for your men and your battalion.
Yes.
And yet, I find that there is a discomfort when it comes to the senior hierarchy of the Pak military. There is, when I say discomfort, is a word to put. Okay. So would you like to elaborate as to, am I observation being right or not? And did it in some form lead to this journey to the French Legion? Answer whatever way you want.
First of all, my compliments on the way you structured your question. I was expecting something similar. I could not. If India doesn't send you on a diplomatic assignment, India suffers, I tell you. Right? Even Pakistan might suffer if you get into diplomatic service, so maybe you're better off where you are. Not to, okay. That having said that, it's a question of myself and hierarchies. I'm not very comfortable in hierarchies because hierarchies, when you take armies, and in this, it's not just the Pakistan Army, it's also the French Foreign Legion. These military organizations cannot run without a hierarchy. They would fail, they would fall flat on their faces, and they would not be able to fulfill their sworn obligations of defense and offensive defense and whatever. Right. Now, having said that, once everybody is within the framework, there are people who are not strong enough, who are not big enough, who will start exploiting the hierarchy for their personal gratification. And so that is where the difference can come in. It's a dichotomy. It can happen to the best of people. It's a form of unconscious corruption. My first CEO was lovely. He was brilliant. I can't say he was my role model because, no, he wasn't my role model. But I was willing to follow him anywhere and do anything that he asked me to. Okay. He was about 35, just 5 years short of real middle age, when the middle kind of sort of, it's hard to control it and keep it behind. And very tough, very fit, real pakka leader. Everything that happened was what he could do first. One of those CEOs, when I was the adjutant, I take the mail for him and he'd be in the push-up position. Thero, hum apne 20 kar rahe hain. And he had been to Lawrence College, Goda Delhi. And he was a Punjabi from the area around Murray, who speak a variation of Saraiki and Pahari. But he couldn't speak it. He couldn't even speak proper Urdu. He was a very eccentric person. Right. Now that's all the good sides, right? We were younger. I wasn't the only teenager who was a lieutenant. There were lieutenants and captains who were about 21, 22. And we were real, proper, good infantry officers. We did everything with our men. We led our men. We ran ahead of them. We did all our running, supervised training. We hardly slept. We were all on the LOC. At night, we checked sentries. And because we were officers and soldiers in a poor army, we never got transport to come and check the company dark. I had to walk, I walked about 12 miles every day in addition to all this just to check the dark and then come back for collective sport. Okay. Now, the moral to this whole long diatribe is we were always and constantly hungry, permanently hungry. And we were expected to eat in the mess. Of course, I ate as often as I could from the langar and I paid. I paid as much as I paid in the mess, and the senior GSTO knew, he'd make a note of that and say, "Theek hai, sir, at the end of the month, I got my bill." But why did I not want to eat in the mess? When you have desi food and you don't have rogan on the salan, and there's not enough masala, and there's no chilies, mirchi, there's no point in eating it. It's just a bad, shoddy version of boiled Angrezi khana. Because his wife used to ring him constantly and nag him. We could tell from the way he was talking, "Ha ha, nahi khara mirchi, ha ha, nahi khara ghee." That is what hierarchies can do. And then this is just a milder version, and it can go very, very, very far. It can go very far. Personal, there were units. The favorite big thing in the Pakistan Army even now is makhaddi halwa. Well, fortunately, he liked makhaddi halwa, but there were Paltons. I know there was the Baloch regiment. All those guys used to come to our Palton. Yaar, makhaddi halwa khila do. Kyun? CO ne band ki hai. It's banned. We can't eat makhaddi. I mean, this is somebody's stomach. The military hierarchy should not interfere in a man's personal culinary taste just because he has a higher rank. Voila, that's the thing about hierarchies. And more or less, it's the same in or actually, it's the same in all good armies. You can't run a good professional, jisko kehte hai tight, what Jawans call, sab palton tat hai. When the palton is tat, that means the hierarchy is doing what it should be doing, only it's doing it from the front, it's not doing it from the behind. But then this temptation occurs. I hope I've answered your question.
Yeah, could you take us to the Foreign Legion a little, 2 minutes, your experience? How did you join, or how much did you serve in the Legion? I know the years you served, but how was your experience in the Legion? Or you're not supposed to speak that. If that be so, you can mention it.
No. Absolutely not. That is always up to a Legionnaires' choice. I'm thinking of where I should start. And I'm thinking what Brigadier B.N. Singh said and what I said to him. So this is, and then General H.K. Singh was, kind enough to say that, no, we really don't have a time constriction. So, okay, you asked for it, and then it's up to you to,
Okay, I'll pull you back in case I find the time is running out. Because I have in my kitty so much to...
Okay, a part of it is very personal, and please don't do it.
Okay, don't. Just...
Right, okay, let's go.
Where did you serve? How long did you serve? Maybe perfectly...
Okay, that's the onion skin. So instead of peeling every layer, I'll go to the core first, and then it won't be reverse chronology. It won't be inverted chronology. We'll start chronologically. I joined the Pakistan Army. I certainly was not a mad nationalist who felt that Pakistan was under so much of a threat that were I not to join the Pakistan Army, Pakistan would collapse. I didn't have such a high opinion of myself. I didn't think I was indispensable. It was kind of like I think like a lot of young people, calculated opinion that, okay, fine, I'll join the army, and I think I'm capable of joining the army. I was just small. I wasn't at Government College, Lahore. I was in Foreman Christian College, Lahore. I'm a Foremanite.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's neither here. They're both rival colleges, and they have the same academic level and the same reputations. And I was a debater and boxer at college, and I thought I was pretty fit, did long distance running, etc. So I joined the PMA, then I joined my Palton. I was in the infantry. This CO I talked about, God bless his soul, he died a few years back. He was one after having, bad-mouthed him very, very lightly on the food. He was one hell of a CO, and I think any lieutenant would be fortunate, especially an infantry lieutenant, to have a CO like him. Then the CO was changed, and we got a new CO. And that was the other extreme from Mirchi to how people can exploit, how people can can get corrupted and corrupt a military hierarchy. In South Asia, one gali you never give is maa ki or bhan ki gali. There are certain bad words which are said with authority and taken with affection. That's the way of talking. It's fine. But you do not give maa ki gali, bhan ki gali. You don't abuse the mother and sister. Certainly not of your subordinate who can't answer back. That is cowardly. He had made a practice of it. I had informed my immediate seniors, because that's, how the hierarchy works. You tell your senior, who tells the senior, who takes it up there, and then you take an interview. And then if you're not satisfied, you ask for his senior's interview in his presence. And then you take him there and you say it to his face. All that was not happening. And my company, at that time, I was not the adjutant, I was a company commander. And I could see my company getting destroyed. So I told my seniors that if he continues to do that and you gentlemen feel that it is not really within your remit to be part of the redress of grievances process, which I'm trying to initiate, I will kick his ass. There was a brigade firing competition. There were troops from 3 Paltons. As firing was going on, it was machine gun firing. It was machine guns on a tripod, HMG. He had his binoculars to his eyes, and he was saying, your mother's this is 1 degree left, and your sister's that is half a degree to the right. And I turned him around. I thumped him, then I turned him back around, and I kicked his ass repeatedly. And I'm a good Punjabi, I'm a Jat, and I know how to abuse, and I was brought up in Lahore. And there was no single abuse I'm not capable of. I did not hurl on him in the presence of troops from 3 Paltons. And then there was another colonel over there who told the 2 IC of my Palton who happened to be there, he won't come near me. He was like, everyone was in shock and he was hopping up and down and he was saying, Mehdi, put him under arrest. So Major Mehdi, who's now a brigadier, and who, again, in case this video circulates around and he hears me, sir, I have not lost 1 iota of my respect for you over the years, over the decades. You are still my senior. And he came from behind me and he said very gently, young man, I'm sorry, I have to do this. Like, now don't start a tamasha with me and start a fist fight. So when I saw everybody in shock, it was just like a frozen tableau, and my sense of humor kicked in. I started laughing. He nearly fainted. He said, young man, you're laughing. I said, well, what do you expect me to do? So anyway, I had a trial. I was given 2 years rigorous imprisonment. I still maintain that technically I was innocent. Why was I technically innocent? Because according to the Evidence Act, which was in black and white, if the charge sheet is wrongly stated, the charge cannot be upheld. And this was a matter of poor Angrezi, in that he kicked la in buttocks, it should have been in the buttocks. Now, had the article been added, the English would have been correct, but there would still have been a major fault because incorrect penetration and the diameter of the Fauji boot cannot penetrate the diameter of the human buttock without extreme serious injury. Well, when I made my statement to the court, I was verbally sanctioned for levity and for not being serious. And the prosecution reminded the court that here is an example that even now when he's standing on the cusp of everything, he is incapable of taking anything seriously, which was wrong. I then was sentenced to 2 years rigorous imprisonment. I spent that in Kotlakpat jail, which is in Lahore. I came out, and you can imagine what my mother and sister did. They put me in another gilded cage. They just wouldn't let me go out. Kuch ho jayega, kuch karega phir. And it all fell on deaf ears that it wasn't something that I karat. It wasn't gundagardi. It wasn't badmash. Anyway, they said, here are your books and take your MA exam. So I appeared as a private candidate for the Punjab University. And I'm very pleased. My sister helped me. She already had an MA. She's absolutely brilliant at literature. She did her thesis on a doctoral dissertation on Remembrance Tagore. She's an expert on Remembrance Tagore. And I got my MA, I got a second division, and then I was employed by the British Council in the library as a book presentation officer. And then I wrote jail reforms because I observed things in prison and I felt I had to write it. Then I wrote army reforms, and these were my two last duties. And I acquitted myself, my last duty done to the salt I had eaten. As a consequence of these two books, there were reviews in Nawai Waqt and Pakistan Times. I received a message from one of my instructors who was also in charge of our debating at the PMA. At that time, he was the private secretary of General Ziaul Haq. He has died, so there is no consequence on him, and may God bless his soul, bless his name, bless his family. Colonel Zahir, and he finished as a brigadier. And he sent me a message through all my course mates. I went to his house in Pindi, in Rawalpindi, and he said, the proceedings to put you on the exit control list have started, and you better get out and go. And where will you go? I said, so either I'll go to Angola or I'll go to the French Foreign Legion. He said, you will go to neither. Can your family afford $5,000? I said, yes. That's more or less the budget. My mother had said that there was always talk, just leave, go away. And he said, go to Brazil. I said, sir, why not the Legion or the Spanish Legion? You damn disgrace. You're an officer. They won't make you an officer. They'll make you a bloody OR. Hame zaleel karaoge. So it went in here, it went out over there. And due to the West's relations with Pakistan, which are now, of course, very much the focus of the world press's attention, nobody was willing to grant me a visa except for the French. They gave me an asylum, a visa. There's some sort of an indication. So the immigration guy who receives your passport, he collects the visa, who puts something on it. He knows that, no, this guy is under these conditions. And then I felt that were France to open its doors to me, I would carry my own burden, not take a stipend from the government. I didn't feel why they should pay me so much, invest so much in me for my personal situation with regard to the country of my birth. Why were they making themselves responsible? I thought they were kind enough to open the doors and let me in. And if I could carry my own rucksack, I went for recruitment and I was taken. So that's how I joined the Legion. It was, of course, very difficult. It was self-demotion from being a commissioned officer and from being a company commander and an adjutant. I found myself a Jawan. And I am anticipating questions. How did I go through it? My best Jawan, I had two of my best Jawans. One, I would just like to take his name, and that is in response to you said that I loved my men, I loved my Paltan. In the acknowledgements of flight to Pakistan, I'm rotten at figures, I'm rotten at gadgets, I can't handle them, but I still remember his number, Jawan. By Assi Ikatali, Jawan Muhammad Sadiq. And the other one was Jawan Mansha. And I said, Azam Gill, you are Jawan Mansha. You act like Jawan Mansha and you will get respected and you will survive. And I did. My soldiering was highly appreciated, and often I did things and people said, I will just conclude with a compliment to the Indian Army. Where did you learn this? How did you do this? You know, those little drills and that smooth way of doing things and that practice way of doing things. And I didn't know enough French to be able to say them, but to my own self, I said, my potential adversary, whom I was going to meet in the field, was neither a conscript of the Soviet army, of most doubtful motivation and shoddy training, nor a half-baked guerrilla in the African bush, but a Maratha, a Gorkha, a Sardar, a Rajput, a Jat of the professional hereditary warriors recruited in the Indian army. And I had to be doubly careful. My NCO instructors at TMA, they used to say to us, Saab, just when we did bayonet fighting, if we wavered, they used to say, Saab, jo samne aa raha hai aapke, uski jeb mein uski paybook hai. That old paybook which soldiers had to carry, which was the way of saying, Saab, he's like you and he's got his salary and he's coming to justify it. So be careful. There you are. I hope.
Thank you. No, you have exceeded our expectations in delivering that answer. And firstly, thank you for a very candid answer, and thank you for the compliment, which was not even backhanded. It was a front-handed compliment for the Indian Army, and I take it with full gusto. Okay, we have run out of time, and I'll take 10 more minutes with you, and I'll cover a little bit of your book. I was very keen to ask you about your LOC experience, but let's see whether we are able to find your time or not. The book under discussion today, which you also mentioned, is Flight to Pakistan. Now, Flight to Pakistan is an entirely different subject. It is based on gangsterism, and like you said earlier to me, it is akin to Godfather. So my question basically relates to the fact that how did you think of a theme like the underworld and the gullies of Lahore and situate such a brilliant novel?
Again, very tactfully, very diplomatically, what you're saying is, hey, you, how the hell did you find all that out? How do you get to know that? Now, Lahore, and I think most of South Asia is like that. When you're a youngster, you're at college, the sort of person who does debating, boxing, etc. You move around. And you move around in all sectors and all sections and all levels of society. And different levels of society send their kids to institutions. And then they invite you home and they become your friends. And this sort of information flows very freely. The other thing is, when my father was a magistrate, there's always a duty magistrate at weekends. And when the police catches somebody, they bring him to the duty magistrate to sign the remand papers. So I grew up with gangsters coming to my house every weekend. Oh. And my father being a basically Christian magistrate, whatever, nothing changed the fact that he was a chota zameen wala jat at heart. And he would tell us, there are two categories of criminals. One are, he always gave a gali, and the others are generally in the Pakistani part of the Punjab, and I think your part of the Punjab as well, known as dukhis, the heartbroken ones. Jinko dukh panchaya hai aur dukh ka jawab di. Like your Madhya Pradesh dacoits call themselves bagi, they never call themselves daku. Okay. Now, when that category of person, somebody like Pan Singh Tomar, if he came, our father would always, our mother was kind to them. She always, in the summer, sent them sattu or tukmalanga cold drink. And our father would say, go talk to them. And they loved it. They used to say, they're such well brought up kids, and we used to talk to them. And then we stayed in Lahore for our education because there were better schools over there. And our father was transferred in the districts. And there was always this fear of repercussion because my father was totally honest, incorruptible, and he followed the law, and he didn't think so-and-so was a relative of so-and-so. So there was always this idea of repercussions. And a lot of the time we went to play at the Kila Gujjar Singh Thana of Lahore, which was a traditional thana in a hollow square. And we played on the grass. And the cells were just open, and there were certain people, our mother would say, Jao beta salam kar do, tamiz se baat karo, talk to them, ask them about. So this information was something very common. And I remember my friend, we called him Jimmy. He came from that area, had gray eyes, very fair skin. He passed himself off as an Anglo-Indian, spoke in an Anglo-Indian accent, German, jainga, ainga. And at Basant, I was at their house on the roof with those beautifully brought up, beautiful girls who I respected as nothing less than the sisters or cousins of my friend. And so I had this information. And of course, I had a lot of time when I was in prison to say that I was assessing my capabilities. And like a lot of soldiers, it was I know how to do a raid. I know how to do an ambush. I can be a gangster.
Okay.
Well, and so that's how it is.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. I would skip the other questions and come to one question on your book. On the books, you have written 3 fiction and 3 non-fiction, maybe a little more on that. But my question relates to the fact that which of the genre do you enjoy writing more, fiction or non-fiction, and why?
Fiction. I'm a storyteller.
Good.
I was always a storyteller. My childhood teacher still calls me every 2 weeks, and I call her every 2 weeks. She's in Canada. She's 84. And she absolutely was adorable, and she adored me, but she used to give me a lot of punishments because I was talkative. And I'll be telling stories to the people sitting next to me. I love telling stories. My head is full of stories.
Okay, good, good. So maybe I'll come to the last question because this 10 minutes are also running out, and this relates.
Sorry.
This relates to your blog, and if you can be as brief as possible.
Yes.
In your blog, there is a 5-part story.
Yes.
On the cattle grazers. Am I right? The
Yes.
cattle
Rustlers of the lock. Yeah.
Across the LOC. Now, for the audience, it's a story about how a young lieutenant from the Pak Army managed to steal a cattle from the Indian side, which gets returned, and again you get it back.
Yes.
So my question to you is, how far is it true, and how much was the challenge?
It is absolutely true, and I did it. I'm looking straight into the camera. The camera doesn't lie, and look into my eyes. I'm not Ronald Reagan, and I'm not saying read my lips. I'm saying read my eyes. It absolutely happened. I went 5 times. I crossed the LOC without authorization. I took 2 men with me. I stole back the cattle. I killed the cattle. We ate the meat, sold the skins. And because my Pulton was a new Pulton, as General HK, he knows about 47 Punjab. It was a new Pulton in his history of the Battle of Chum. And I bought a whole set of brand new utensils so that my troops, when they had their cousins come and visit the Pulton and they took them to the langar, they were like the older units and they had good utensils to each. And it absolutely happened. And I missed a ceasefire violation from the skin of my teeth. And then I was sent on punishment on the PT course.
Yeah, the story does mention that.
Yes.
Like the Indian Army.
Yes. But they're the same. They are basically the same armies which were split into 2. That famous thing of Sabzada Yaqub charging his brother's company is 100% true. And every word in the Distant Drums by Colonel Manohar Malgonkar, it drips the truth and it drips tears and blood.
Okay, on that note, thank you, Dr. Gill. I wish I could have continued, but it will be...
I'm sorry. I warned you. I warned you.
So
Yeah.
whatever little time HK now gives me, it's up to you to do the needful in the reverse manner. So I'm open.
Carry on,
to
no
you,
problem.
Available.
Carry on.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, before I avail myself of the honor of introducing General Nitin Gadkari, I would like to thank Military Literature Festival, especially scholar and historian General H.K. Singh, for honoring me with this invitation and allowing me the privilege of sharing who I am and what I am with so many intelligent people, and also his brilliant technical team who have set all this up and made it a success. I will now give myself the honor of introducing to you General Nitin Gadkari, the scholarly general, as much scholar as sportsman, geostrategic analyst, novelist, and for me, all this synthesizes in his paintings. He's also an artist. He has a paintbrush in one hand, he has a pen in the other, and he used to have a big, huge gun because, like Napoleon Bonaparte, he was an artillery officer. He has that in common with him. And I can't say a third arm with a gun in it because he wouldn't have been able to lift that. But you can imagine these three attributes coming into him. He has 37 years of service in the Indian Army. He served for a long time in Kashmir. He commanded a brigade which was in operations in Kashmir. Then he had the singular honor of being responsible for the entire artillery complement of Northern Command. Along with this, he is, I don't know much about golf, but he is a very, very good golfer. I think he's won championships in that as well. A cricketer. Again, unfortunately, a game which I have not really followed, but which I admire tremendously. And I'm very surprisingly, and I'm very proud of, because South Asians have appropriated something from the Goras, just as they appropriated polo from South Asia, and we do it better than them. And he is one of those people. His military career is also complemented by a whole lot of academic laurels. I need to consult my notes. He's got an MBA, he's got an MSc, he's got a whole lot of master's degrees, a collection of them, but it all culminated in his PhD in organizational behavior and motivation. And I've taken a quick sneak look, like a lazy academic. I read the introduction of his thesis, and then I was in a hurry to go through it, so I went straight to the conclusion. And he's done in-depth interviews of people in Kashmir, analyzed them. It would be the envy of any academic. And it does all those stereotypes we have, that there is no bridge between brain and brawn, have been smashed by him, even by General H.K. Singh, who is himself, I forgot to mention, a poet. And on Maja House, I was part of the audience when he appeared and he read his poetry. Equally, General Gadkari is also involved with 3 companies at a very high level. And I should have taken notes on the designation, but he can't be anything less than a director general of 3 companies. On top of it, he has this meticulously plotted novel, Oscar Tango. It is set in Kashmir, and it is quite obvious that it draws on all his experience of Kashmir, and not just his experience as a brigade commander, also his experience as an academic doing his research for his thesis. And it all just comes together. There is this thing that good writing, fiction writing, is also based on research. It's not always formal research. Research is also observation, which has not been formalized. And in the case of Nitin Gadkari, both come together, and his ability to fit in character where they have extremely hard choices. They take those choices, they suffer to decrease suffering, and there are layers of moral lessons to be drawn. And at the same time, it is entertainment in the great spirit of Philip Sidney, 17th century, the art of poesy, who has left this legacy that the poet, today we say writer, but in those days it was poet discovering anybody with a pen in his hand, must entertain and instruct. To instruct alone is not sufficient. It can be boring. To entertain alone is just being a juggler, which is very commendable, but it is not enough. And I think Sir Philip Sidney's spirit would be very happy reading Oscar Tango from that point of view. And my first question to you is, I've On and off, I'll be glancing down to make sure. During writing, what was the biggest challenge that Oscar Tango presented?
Thank you, Dr. Gill, for that elaborate introduction. It's more than all the introductions put together for my life, I guess. But thanks a lot for that. That's a very good question from a first-time author's perspective. The biggest challenge, as you would probably have realized yourself, for a first-time author is to believe that he can write. It is very hard to believe for anyone who starts that he can write, and it has taken me so many years even to believe that I could write a book. So that challenge, breaking that barrier to coming into, dropping from not writing to writing, was the biggest challenge I faced. But more importantly, it was in the book, when you make a plot, a broad plot is made, which is probably easier, but when you're trying to fit in the threads of the characters, such that all these threads come and join in the end. And you have to tie that knot so that no single character is left loose for a reader to say what happened to Gul or what happened to Ruxana or what happened to Ehsan. So, my characters. So that I thought was the most difficult part of tying up the knots in the end and getting the story to a logical end along with the characters. That was probably the most difficult part. And apart from that, of course, one more was the timeline. The timeline is 40 years. It was so difficult for me to keep this in mind, that who was born when. So I had created an Excel sheet literally from 1980 to 2019 so as to fit in, so that I do not go wrong on ages and do not go wrong at the times when they meet, at what age do they meet. So these two, I guess, were the biggest challenges. There were many challenges, but these were the two biggest challenges.
What you're just talking about, taking the book to the end. What you did with Lara's theme was devious, wicked, and evil. Because I was reading it, I was reaching the end, and the biggest thing, all fiction runs around what if, and you want an answer. The reader wants an answer. When I was reading your book, I was a reader. I wasn't a writer. I wasn't your fellow writer. I was a reader. And that is a superb touch, to be able to control it from the beginning, then suspend it and bring it in at the end and put it in such a way at the beginning that the reader would remember it at the end. Because you can do these, people do these clever little things, and then the reader comes to the end and he can't remember where Lara was at the beginning. And it's a transition for the next question, which is, did you do this to an outline? Did you do this to a partial outline and then were overtaken by the story? Did you dictate to the story, or did the story dictate itself to you, and at what stage?
Okay, so that's another very interesting question. It's an intricate question, a difficult question for any author. As you would know, that there is a broad line of a plot that you have to create before you start writing. And there is a premise on which you go. And the premise in this particular case was that whatever I state as a story must be true to the facts that are faced. So there is somewhere the premise of reality that must reflect in the writing. And that reality must continue to remain as such, rather than make it a fiction and people feel, no, ye to ho nahi sakta. So that premise had to be kept. So from that perspective, while the plot was made, the minor plots were plotted all the time as I was writing, and the thoughts were coming to my mind, and it constantly kept changing. There were so many situations that kept changing, and I kept iterating in my own minds that should this be a better way to do it, or would this be a better way to do it? And I changed so many times to make it a better looking. So even that Lara's theme, which, as you say, was a masterstroke, it was not plotted in the beginning. It came in the middle somewhere, and it was happening all the time. So at the back was the bigger plot, the central plot, and rest of it was driving around the premise. The premise was to tell the story of the experience that one has had in the valley for so long.
Conventional wisdom has always said that fiction is not about reality, it's about the truth. So where's the truth? Where do you situate the truth in your book, and where do you situate the reality in Oscar Tango.
So at the end of my back page says, if there is a small item in that, it says that the reader is confused and is constantly thinking whether this could have happened. Is it a story or whether this could have happened? So that was the basic premise also, which I said to myself when I started, that the story should be weaved in a manner that it bears your experience in the story, in the narrative, in bits and pieces, yet it should not take away the value of entertainment as a fiction, because fiction gives you this romantic notion in your head where you keep dreaming. But the moment you put a reality into it, you get constrained by it to an extent. So I didn't want to constrain myself by pure reality. I wanted that reality within the realms of fiction. And that is where I use my personal experience to put it more fictional than real. But at the same time, each of it is real in some sense because it is happening. What I have written is happening, if not to me all the time, to so many people who were around me. See, one person alone could not have gone through the experience that the protagonist, Colonel Jayesh, could have gone through. That would have been a superhuman fellow. But what Colonel Jayesh went through, all of us collectively have gone through at some point in time. So that is what I did, to collect the realities and put it into fiction.
Attila the Hun.
Yeah.
He had the Emperor of Rome on a rooftop, and he snapped his fingers to a couple of his soldiers and he said, "Jump!" And they jumped and died. Hassan al-Sabah, the head of what are wrongly called assassins, Ashishin, etc., old man of the mountain, he did the same. So even before modern technology, there is this, like the search for excellence within armies is linked to having completely robotic, perfectly obedient soldiers who work within an amoral framework, have given up their souls and their bodies to their commander. In modern times, there's a series called Hannah. There's the Bourne Identity. That has become a whole franchise, but you and I are of the age, I think we're people who actually read the James Bond books before we saw the movies. I've actually read Robert Ludlum and his Bourne Identity, etc. And Ludlum and these people are talking, they've taken the CIA as the great Satan, and the CIA is constantly trying to dodge democratic supervision, tweak people's DNA, and produce these sort of horrid killers whom they can, at a tweak, make them do all sorts of awful things for the preservation of the great American vision. Right. Your book, Oscar Tango, has taken this and made it frighteningly logical, right? To me, it's not Kashmir or anywhere. To me, it is the fact that an extra-governmental organization, which is beyond the supervision, because even in dictatorships, there is some sort of, there's some sort of oversight, even if it is in the street, getting dissatisfied over the price of sugar or the price of onions, right? There is some sort of thing, but these organizations, yes, it could possibly happen, and the thought is frightening, and I'd like your comments on that.
So Robert Ludlum was my most, what should I say, dear author to me. I've read all Robert Ludlum's till date, I guess. And the idea of re-engineering does have a semblance to his, I think, Holcroft Covenant, where the Sonnekinder, the boys were used by the Aryan stock of Hitler. So yet this idea has been in many books and many movies. The Boys of Brazil, Dr. Mengele, if you recollect.
Yeah.
Even that has a bit of this. But the question that I had in mind is not the idea, but how do I use the idea to put it in reality?
Yes.
I used the idea, purely the idea, and brought it into a framework where, like you said, it becomes plausible. People say, could this have happened? It could have happened. Would it happen sometime in future? So that was the challenge that I was facing. And what you're saying is not only restricted to authors. It's all the armies in the world today would like to have a universal soldier.
Yeah,
Jean
that's it.
Claude Van Damme.
Yes,
So
yes.
so that breed, everyone, there is always a struggle how to create it. And as long as I'm able to bring focus to it, I'd achieve my aim. So it was just an idea. It is a metaphorical idea. That is why I said the novel is an allegory. It's an allegory. It is more symbolic in more than one ways. So I hope that answers that question.
It does. It does indeed. It does indeed. Thank you so much. I'll just take a look.
Yeah.
And yes, all writing is kind of qualified by genre. And in the thriller genre, there are certain conventions. If you just pick out your average thriller, it is built on a superhero. And it's dominated by the Anglo-American vision of things in which the world is in danger. And there's this superhero who's a maverick, slightly outside of society. And they have inflated the idea of the X. Now you're an X, I'm an X, and the audience is full of X. Come on, yaar, how much of our physical acrobatics are we now capable of doing? Huh? You see Mel Gibson, he's got wrinkles in his neck like me, skin tight jeans, he's stuck in them, and he's doing all these roly-boolies on concrete without breaking his neck. And so one of these characters, then he goes in a nick of time, he saves the world. And Oscar Tango is such a welcome relief from that. Your two heroes, or one and a half heroes, Ehsan and Gul, are very human. They change, they mutate. Jayesh, I think probably I would say that there's a joint stock company of heroes. There are three heroes who have to share in the heroism. But Jayesh's heroism is the heroism of what one would expect of any good army officer in a professional army. That's his job. He signed for it. He's paid for it. He's bloody well better do it, hadn't he? If he doesn't do it, he gets into trouble at the end of the day. It's not a moral choice he makes against odds. So what motivated you to move away from the stereotype Hercules and have normal human beings?
Quickly, I'll answer that question. Maybe the time is running out. So this is an excellent question. And this question of genre is very typically addressed by authors. And what you're asking me is a fiction genre, which is a set routine of a hero, a good, a bad, the villain, the good pervades over bad, and the hero remains good and the villain remains bad. And that's exactly what I wanted to beat. And that is where I beat the genre of fiction. I wanted them to cross over, and I made at least two of them. And in my narrative, I find two or three heroes. And like you mentioned Ehsan, but for me, Gul and Ruxana are the two main heroes. Jayesh is quintessential army officer, like you said.
I forgot Ruxana, yes.
Quintessential army officer. He will do what he is expected to do the best. And that's what all of us are. So we are not really heroes. And that's the point I wanted to bring out. And in fact, that's where I beat a lot of myths in that a girl cannot be a hero, a terrorist cannot be a good guy, a Muslim cannot be a patriotic fellow. There are so many myths that I've tried to break in this novel, and it is purely out of a story. It is out of conviction of what I did, and like you mentioned in the research, it's all part of that. It is not fiction in that sense. It is part of the experience that I experienced, which actually has come out through the characters that I've set. And these characters have changed. And in fact, if you see Colonel Muhammad, I'm forgetting Ahmed, the other guy who is the ISI guy, he changes for the worse. He is a patriot to start with, and he becomes a devil in the end. And he realizes
He becomes a rogue.
So these shades of human character are deliberately there to beat the stereotype. And that was I didn't know. Now that you tell me, educated me, I know now. But when I started the novel, it just happened as a storyteller.
Lovely.
It wasn't intended to beat a genre. It just happened, to be truthful.
Can I just ask one last question, please?
With HK's permission.
Just one last question.
Yes.
Why is the novel called Oscar Tango?
Okay, that's a great one, and I think my conversation would have been incomplete. The novel in its first edition, if you saw it, is Oscar Tango on target. So it is OT, is when you say it can be on target. Now, on target is that you want to be focused, you want to be on target. But that's not the real reason. The real reason was, in some manner, I wanted to pay tribute to my arm, that is Gunners. And Oscar Tango is a very essential part of an OP officer. It's observer target, from where he corrects the fire and brings effective fire.
Yes. And
Oscar Tango is, from my side, it's my giving thanks to my parent arm, that is Ganesh.
yes, and I will obviously have no time to ask the last question, but I can have the last word, which was,
Wow.
how come a nice guy like you opted for the artillery, became a gunner?
No. I would not take that bait. I would not take that bait. It will take another 20-minute session, but let's say that is more destiny than design.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
HK, yeah.
आई थिंक आप दोनों ने मिलके जोश पे रोगन तो चढ़ा दिया. It was sometime in 2015 we came up with the idea of Military Literature Festival, and it has since mushroomed. It was went to Western Command, and Chandigarh picked it up, and now we are doing it in Lucknow. And today is our last session for the maiden year, and we have done it on our own, just 9 of us, with support of Pankaj. And as we move into the next year, how do you connect to us? You can always go to our website, www.militarylitfest.in, and that is about Military Literature Festival. But Gill Saab, you are a Sher Gill Jat at heart, and Gadkari, you are a Mard Maratha, and the banter was equally powerful, and the ideas of Universal Soldier and gangsters and Cosa Nostra and things like that put into one, it made a great debate, or rather questioning each other. And next thing I'm going to try is the Makaddi Halwa. I already tried the brinjal with the boiled eggs, which Azam Gill taught through one of his blogs. And incidentally, 47 Punjab, the newly raised, actually ran into my regiment, that is 72 Armored Regiment, battalion minus a company towards the heights, Mandiala Heights, and the company towards the southern portion. But that is about war. But we began with the talking about peace, and we talked of thrillers. So great that you both are writing, and it appears to me that Azam will make a great movie, and Oscar Tango will also make an interesting film. Somebody should pick up this idea. With that, we will be winding up the 15 sessions. We have touched 50 panelists live at Lucknow. We will see whether it will be live telecast, otherwise it will be on the YouTube. It is the Dastan Goi of 1971. So how do you manage such a big and complete war into just about 40 minutes of talking, and that too verbal and oral Kissa Goi? We are working on that with Himanshu, who's very good. But last word to both of you, something to motivate us to keep going. Word about Military Literature Festival Lucknow. First to Dr. Azam, and then to Nitin.
It has been a very enriching experience. I've followed most of the sessions. And I am overwhelmed by your dedication to the profession in such a way that it actually transcends national borders. There is an international brotherhood of soldiers. And while following all these sessions, I sense that gave me the confidence to that spurred me on to confidently accept your motivation. I have been privileged and honored. I would also like to take this opportunity to make a few suggestions. I used to very keenly follow Bharat Rakshak, and the site has kind of now fizzled down. And they had a whole lot of things going for publication. I read articles by Pakistan Army officers, American Army officers. There is a whole international brotherhood of soldiers who have picked up the pen, who write well, and who have to run around getting published. And perhaps Military Literature Festival could have some sessions and come up with ideas on how to coordinate, help, have something like a workshop where one edits the other's work or something like that, and maybe think of doing things like that. Perhaps also offer, yes, Bollywood has started making very good action movies, very good war movies, but it is so clear where you see the gap that they have. In the credits, you hardly ever find technical advisor with a military rank. And perhaps retired officers and retired soldiers. Some of the movies, yes, I think there was one movie in which the actors and actresses did about 2 weeks of military training, but I think that was very, very exceptional. And perhaps your also put all your archives together, your video archives together, so that they are more easily accessible. And I don't have any other suggestions except that I can run through all the adjectives in my repertoire to say thank you to you. But, in the army, it's always brevity and clarity, and I've made my point. I hope I've made my point. And thank you very much. And I would take much great pleasure in a language I don't use and saying to all of you, Dhanivad.
Yeah, HK, Dr. Gill, Azam Gill has said more than what I can say or add. Yet, profound thanks. And as you know that in some way, I was associated with you with the thought of doing a Pune Military Fest. It didn't materialize for the time being, and you converted that into a Lucknow Military Fest, and it was a great success. And I hope that, and it has in fact gone beyond the Chandigarh Mil Fest, which was the pioneer of Military Literature Festival. And this idea of creating Lit Fest in major metropolitan cities need to be taken up from you. You have exceeded that, and I'm sure now in times to come, this will become an yearly event of sort, yearly in the sense more concise yearly event of sort. And I wish you all the best and great work by you and your team. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. There is only one question, and we have to respect that part. Question is to Nitin. Why the military literature, especially in Hindi, created in India is mostly street type, lacking any serious characterization. Even in English, we don't find serious military literature. I recollect reading a book by Manohar Mulgaonkar, Operation Bandicoot Run, which was only serious book I could lay my hands on. So apart from this, there's no question, but everyone is saying it was a fascinating session. All the comments are like that. So why are we unable to really produce books like Private Ryan or make films like Private Ryan? While we await Bongo Bandhu, which is being made by Shyam Benegal and team with the with the Bangladesh actor, and it is currently under filming in Dhaka. We await this movie, which will be quite close to realism. So these 2 points.
Yeah, So this question I have addressed a number of places. The language to me does not really matter, because ultimately, if Bollywood takes up, the language will be Hindi only, or maybe Hindi and English both. So, but writing part is what really matters to me. One of the reasons is, one is, if you look at it in the per capita or statistically, the number of military writers in India vis-a-vis other writers. This genre, military writing, is a very recent one, and not too many have dabbled into it. For the simple reason that probably people do not understand this genre as better, as good as somewhere outside would, because they've not been exposed to the military part. As the armed forces open up more and more to the public, and people understand operations and how difficult it is to operate in a certain environment, and then you write about it, I'm sure this will happen. But one of the most serious challenges is writing in Hindi. While I can write in Hindi, I can't type in Hindi. I mean, I can type in Hindi, but I have to go to the keyboard. So I found that when I was translating my story into Hindi, which I could do myself, I found it very difficult to actually keyboard it. But that's just a symbolic part of it. Somebody could have done it for me. So it becomes easier for me, somebody who knows both the languages, still to write in English and not in Hindi. So I hope to an extent I have answered. But that question about Manohar Mulgaonkar, if he's read Operation Bandicoot Run, you must read Distant Drum and Bend in the Ganges. The book that Dr. Azam Gill meant, Distant Drums is a must for all soldiers.
May I say something, please?
Yes, yes.
General Gadkari, there's something I started using. It's here somewhere in my drawer. Yeah, this little thing. But I gave it up because for X reasons. It's got a voice processing thing. So I can speak into it, and it becomes 95% accurate text, and the 5% I can do by hand. I wonder, with all the technology that India has amassed, it's called dragon speaking naturally, this one, whether there's not a voice speaking thing, and as you're playing golf and hitting that poor ball with your stick in that beautifully landscaped place, you can keep talking. It's just an idea. Because I would love to see Oscar Tango done in Hindi.
Inshallah.
And then retranslated into French. Why not French? Yeah, why not French?
Inshallah. We'll try, surely try. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Azam Gill and General Nitin Gadkari, we are extremely grateful from the Military Literature and Cultural Festival Foundation that you came and you made our show blossom. It was very interesting to run into Dr. Azam Gill. How do you, sitting in Lucknow, run into somebody who's in France and who has an interesting story? That's another story. And I think one of the great sessions to conclude. Thank you very much. And on behalf of Colonel Sharad Awasthi and Military Literature Festival Lucknow and all our founder members, are very grateful thanks to all the audience and to both of you. And we look forward to more novels from both of you and very more good critique as well as blogs. And have a nice evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, all of you. Take care. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for the honor, and thank you for the privilege.